Okay, so in the sixth chapter, in our final chapter for the term, we are discussing the role of corporate directors and officers. Um, okay. So this should look familiar. We started the previous chapter with this, so we're familiar with the roles of the stockholders, right? They're owners. They primarily, their most important duty, I should say, is the election of the directors, um, who are the long range uh, planning and division, long range planning um, and strategy arm of the corporation, whose most important job is the um, hiring, evaluation, and compensation of the officers, your CFO, your COO, your CEO. And then you have employees of the corporation who, of course, report to the officers. Quick review there. Um, so, directors, I mentioned their most important job: selection, evaluation of officers. They also declare dividends. Directors vote on corporate matters. Um, Typically, the board is an odd number, so that if everybody votes, there's no risk of deadlock. All right. Directors are elected by shareholders, can be removed for failure to perform. Because typically in a modern corporation, directors are compensated. It's a great job if you can get it, because you meet, in some cases, 4 times a year, and the compensation can be, $30,000, $40,000. Sometimes you meet more. Sometimes the compensation can be more or less. But it's a good gig if you can get it. But the reality is that you really have to be very knowledgeable of the industry, right? Because you can't vote blindly. You have to vote from a position of knowledge on important issues. Directors, and I referenced this previously in the previous chapter. If, for instance, if the CEO also has a seat on the board of directors, that's referred to. He's an officer. He or she will be an officer, um, and they're referred to as an inside director, right? Whereas directors who do not hold management positions are outside directors. All right. Uh, Generally, to affect business, a quorum, which is, if not specified in the bylaws, is a majority of directors. So if you have 9, then 5 would need to be present for board votes to be binding to the company. All right. Companies are allowed to specify a smaller quorum, and also meetings don't have to be in person. Skype is the functional equivalent of attendance. So Skype or Teams or Zoom, as the modern technology would dictate, all would count towards a quorum, even if the directors are geographically in different locations. So here we have just a quick visual representation of the management roles and responsibilities of directors. Um, so the big ones: decide whether to pursue new product lines or business opportunities. So if a corporation decides to expand into a new geographic area, that has to start from the board. Or if they're deciding to compete in a new market, that would also start from the board, right? So an example here: Apple Computer, right? They famously made the decision to change their name from Apple Computer to Apple, start selling cell phones and device and tablet devices and wearables, watches, and all that other things. That started from the board. All right. It's the board that often represents within the collective bargaining. All right. Negotiations. Sometimes the CEO will take the lead, but then inform the board, and then the board will vote. All right. Selling of a substantial amount of business assets, that needs to come from the board as well. Obviously, the selection, compensation of officers, right, and supervising high-ranking employees. Any CEO being fired, it comes from the board, right? So if you've ever wondered, if I'm the highest-ranking employee, how do I get fired? The board fires you, all right? Issuance of stocks and bonds, and the declaration of dividends, all right? We'll get a little deeper into that later in this chapter. It's not uncommon for the board to have subcommittees. And they can be anything, and they may vary from company to company. But one common example is the executive committee, which really is designed to connect meetings, board meetings. So if there are important votes that arise between meetings, say meetings are quarterly, board meetings are quarterly, the executive committee has the power to vote for specified things, not really big things, but specified issues between those meetings. All right. And the audit committee. So you guys are going to be familiar with this. Publicly traded companies have to have an audit committee that is responsible for the hiring and communication with the public accounting firm. And it needs to be at that level in the organization, because if fraud is coming from the office of the CEO, well, it wouldn't make sense for the CEO to have the responsibility for selection and compensation of the public auditing firm. Since the board is not typically involved in day-to-day operations, that is the ideal place for it. And the audit committee also, in addition to overseeing the external audit, will also oversee any internal audit function. So if you're interested in internal audit, it's a great career opportunity, because you're going to be front and center with very, very high-ranking individuals within the company, within the board of directors. You're going to be making presentations to the board, and it's something that bodes well for one's career trajectory. All right, let's talk about the rights of directors. All right, so the right to participate in board meetings. This also includes the right to notification of when they are. That makes it difficult for certain board members to be froze out. You know, we're going to conduct business without this particular board member because we don't agree with the way that they're going to vote, right? Well, board members, by virtue of their appointment as a board member, have a right to participate in meetings. Inspection, and we've seen this before. This is just a right to the books. All right, we've seen that with partnership. It's very similar. Directors have the right and almost really responsibility to understand the financial condition of the corporation that they're voting for. Indemnification. All right. So, if a director is sued for actions taken within their role as director, the company needs to step in and provide a legal defense, and if they are found liable, cover the loss. That's indemnification.